Awesome. So thank you all for bearing with us with the room changes and all of that. But now we're quite literally at a roundtable discussion to talk about food justice and its intersection with racial equity. So my name is Taylor Sligh. I service the AmeriCorps VISTA for Feed the Pack. And in my role, I build capacity for the pantry through helping to organize fundraising efforts, community engagement, and educating the campus community about food security and how to access resources or need-based resources for those who need it on campus. And now I'm going to take some time to introduce our professionals here today. A little bit out of order, we have Brielle Wright. Her and her sister are co-founders of the Farmer's Bag. Brielle will be here shortly, but they founded it in 2020. BAG stands for Blessed, Abundant, and Gifted. And they founded it as a way to blend their agricultural and mental health backgrounds. And their organization is dedicated to giving back to their community through agricultural and farming opportunities, including community outreach, addressing food insecurities, and assisting older farmers and educating the youth on agriculture history. Here in person, we have Mr. Ray Jeffers, Director of the Farmers of Color Network, and you have a new position as of recently as well. Yeah, he's a North Carolina native, and he was actually born and raised in Person County, where he operates his family's Century Farm, purchased by his great-grandfather in 1919. And he has a ton of community service work behind him, including 12 years as an elected Person County Commissioner, as well as president of the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners in 2014, and an executive board member of the National Association of Counties. Next, we have Nick Robertson, who is the Director of Hunger and Nutrition at Urban Ministries of Wake County. Nick served 2 years with Public Allies, where he was the Backpack Buddies Coordinator for Interfaith Food Shuttle. And he also participated in New Politics Leadership Academies, answering the call in February of 2017, and its Campaign Staff Academy beta program in July of 2018. And in his role today, he advocates on behalf of those affected by poverty, by providing food nutrition, promoting health and wellness, and laying the foundations of home. And last but not least, we have Sue, who's a registered dietitian and licensed dietitian and nutritionist. She works here at NC State. And before coming to state, she provided outpatient nutrition services across the lifespan in Vermont and New Hampshire, with interest in diabetes education, chronic disease management, fitness, and wellness coaching. Sue provides one-on-one services as well as group presentations. So we're excited to have you all here. And let me get out of this presentation so that we can see each other. And thank you all for taking the time to be with us this evening. So just as a general reminder, this is a discussion. Please be respectful. And if you have any questions, if you're here, feel free to raise your hand, or if you're on Zoom, put it in the chat and we'll get to you. So to start off, the USDA defines food insecurity as a lack of consistent access to enough food for every person in a household to live an active and healthy life. And many of us know it could be a temporary situation or an ongoing issue. So in our respective areas, what does food insecurity look like among the people that you work with or the folks that you interact with within our community? That question is kind of for everyone. If anyone wants to jump in.
I'll go, I guess. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me, Taylor, first of all. Right now, food insecurity looks like the air we breathe right now. It's everywhere right now, especially throughout the pandemic and especially throughout what's going on in our city right now. And I mean, even where I work, all of our college students. A lot of them do not have food. My pantry is in a food desert. So food insecurity looks way, way bigger of a monster than it did 10 years ago. It's touching everybody, especially the supply chain shut everything down, and just seeing some of these major food banks, they are suffering. So that trickles down to everybody else. So I just say it's very, very, very big, bigger than it has been in my area since I've been doing this. I ran Backpack Buddies about 12 years ago, and the resources were a lot more varied. There were like 50 to probably 75, no, I would say probably 50% less food insecure people here than there are now. And the pandemic added like 40,000 more people, I believe, and maybe more than that. So it's just a raging, raging fire right now, which we need to try to put out.
I think it was pretty prevalent. I can say I probably first got elected in 2008, and around 2010, we started hearing the terms food desert and things like that. I think COVID shined the light on it like it did a lot of things. People that have access, but we knew people, especially in low income housing or in areas that were food deserts, were relying on convenience stores. And so we knew they could not access fresh food at those convenience stores. Prices were a lot higher. Many of the people that were acquiring their food from there may have been using EBT, and so that didn't allow that to go further by paying those higher prices for those type of items. But I think now, just given the times and what we've been through the last few years with COVID, it's just really shined a light, especially when the supply chain shut down. And so I think that's why you see so many people now really kind of diving in or getting into this work.
Oh, wow. I read that in North Carolina, something like over 1.2 million people face hunger. And in Wake County alone, about 15% of residents face food insecurity. Just being on campus looking from our scope, does anyone have an estimate about how many folks face food insecurity on campus?
In a study that I recently read in like 2020, it was around 14.8% based on the sample size they had. So that's around what I think it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So that Dr. Haskett study.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was in 2017 was 14%. In 2020, she redid it, and that jumped up to 23%. And now after COVID, it's estimated to be closer to 25% on campus, which estimates to about the size of the freshman class. If you can imagine all of those folks struggling with food insecurity. So yeah, it's very much prevalent even in our own backyard, so to speak. I know you all mentioned food deserts. How does that relate to the language of folks starting to use food apartheid as more of a way to explain it as giving credit to the systematic or systemic causes of those food deserts, if that makes sense? How do you all feel about that language, and how is that reflected in the disparity between folks who face food insecurity?
Well, I probably forgot the first part of your question, but what we see now, from a rural area, and as Taylor mentioned, I wear many hats. I'm a farmer, elected official, just newly elected to the North Carolina General Assembly, representing District 2, which is all of Person County and Northern Durham. And at RAFI, where I work, which stands for Rural Advancement Foundation International, we work with quite a bit of farmers, and we see them as an answer for this, because we know we can source locally, and we have farmers that would want to grow more if they hit the markets. And so the more we kind of educate folks about sourcing their food locally, where they can get it from, creating these markets for these farmers. We know, I'm a small farmer, vegetable farmer, and I have pasture raised hogs. I can't supply bacon to NC State, but I can supply my community. I can supply sausage to my community. I can supply fresh vegetables to my community. And we've got these small farmers throughout the state, even in the urban areas. There's a big movement right now for urban agriculture. Even so, so much to where our Farm Service Agency is starting to try to define what urban ag is. And so they can participate, those farmers can participate in the programs and stuff that support farmers just like.
W5G3 and Eric on.
So there's a big push now even for urban ag, even with our USDA, to where they can now participate in a lot of programs that what we generally saw big commodity farmers participating in. And even now in some cities, they have urban local boards to look at these type of things, but we only saw those generally in rural areas.
And we have another farm education professional in the room now. I'll kind of bounce off of what you were saying. So considering Black farmers today, what would you all describe as your day-to-day life compared to other farmers in the United States?
This is Black farmers in general.
Yeah, so I guess being more specific, we know that over 3 million farmers are just in America today, but of those, less than 2% are Black. Considering other like land laws, discriminatory banking practices, and other practices that may prevent Black farmers from, I don't want to say getting ahead, but having the same opportunities as non-Black farmers. How has that impacted you all?
So I would say, now one thing about farmers, I don't care what color you are, we all waking up with the same mission every day, right? We got to wake up, we have a job to do, just like anybody else. But when it comes to, if you're a new Black farmer, I think the struggle is a little more real because you don't know the game. And if you haven't had someone who has taught you or who has been a mentor, or you don't really understand how to navigate maybe USDA, or you don't have the funding to obtain, that's a totally different world, right? For farmers who have been here a little longer, the biggest struggles are transitioning. If you are not a, if you're, a lot of our farmers are aging, right? So we don't have a lot of young farmers. Most of our Black farmers are up in age. They're 60 plus. So whenever you think about them, at least in North Carolina, the ones that I'm working with, a lot of the ones that are more established, they are 60 plus. And their biggest struggles are transitioning maybe from row crops, finding easier ways to get through their day-to-day, so that they don't have to do as much work that was hands-on. So there wasn't a lot of succession planning. Depending on who they were, where they came from, a lot of the resources that were provided to farmers who don't look like me, white farmers, you know, and even then, they don't have succession planning. You got a lot of older farmers who are very prideful. They don't want to share. They don't want to talk about what happened with their finances. They don't want to talk about those things. You come and you work. So a lot of the farmers, they might have had daughters, so they've got son-in-laws who are coming into this space. They're not sharing everything about their money with them. So they're teaching them the business, the working part of it, but they're not teaching them the financial piece or what that looks like, how much things cost. They're having to really sit at these people's feet and almost beg them for the information to be able to keep moving forward. So the day-to-day lifestyle, just of a farmer, a Black farmer in general, it just depends on what your age range is, what you're growing. There's a lot of transition right now. You see a lot more farms going into more agribusiness. You see, especially the new farmers, they're looking at agribusiness. That's why we're really trying to push, or why we need more funding for actual farming. You've got some farming with the agritourism, but you might have more livestock. You might have more things that cater to people actually just being able to come on and have a fun farm experience, right? It's not all just the entire farming piece. So it just depends on what the operation is. I hope I answered your question.
Good.
Three big issues, halt farmers of color in general, but especially Black farmer success, is access to credit. Heirs property issues, like you were mentioning, no succession planning, so there's no clear title to the land because it's family land, and it just kind of kept passing down, and if there's no clear title, they can't take advantage of some of the programs that's out there to assist. And then land access, and land access is huge for beginning farmers, to even try to come into the profession, right? And so, you know, there's a huge documented history of discrimination through USDA and farm loans against farmers of color, but more so against Black farmers than any other race. 35% of Black farmer loans were denied. When you look at their white counterparts, 10%. And so to making it farming, you have to have a good account, you have to have a market, and you have to be able to take advantage of the programs that are there to subsidize. And if you can't take advantage of those USDA programs to help subsidize, then you're already behind the eight ball. And but those, I would say, would be the three big issues: heirs property, access to land, and then access to credit.
Yeah, and even with access to the USDA programs, if you haven't been in farming 3 to 5 years, you can't get the money. You have to have time, skin in the game. So if you're not born into it, it's difficult to really make that start into agriculture, to farming.
We did have a question in the chat, kind of going off of that. What type of language would be appropriate to use when talking about food insecurity? And I guess I'll pitch that to all of us. Is there a certain language that you feel cushions the stigma behind food insecurity? Does that make sense?
I can chime in first for that one. Thanks for having me here today. I know that they've tried, like the USDA has tried to change or maybe swap in new language for that, in the idea of discussing food security. So the idea of how well accessible is food to this individual and that they can thrive and flourish. So really trying to think of like, what are they like? Yes, the opposite would be that insecurity portion, but like, that means that we need to really question, like, how well are they doing in all the things that they need in terms of resources and knowledge and access. So really, that's oftentimes like my conversation with students is not just like, do you have food insecurity, but it's really about diving into like, do you feel like you have the skills to cook and take care of yourself? Do you feel like you have access to a car? Do you feel confident in the kitchen and knowledgeable in that? So it really helps kind of bridge that gap between like, what do I have available to me and where is that gap? So it feels less like you were saying, you know, less of a negative connotation, but really like, where is that gap that we need to fill?
I would like to piggyback off of that a little bit. When you talk about language and food insecurity, one thing that we have been trying to tackle is when you talk about metrics of measurement, and how that is reported, what it looks like. And the biggest example and one of the biggest opponents for me is metrics of weight. That's how a lot of food pantries and food banks measure their success. But if you think about it, the healthy things you need, like leafy greens and cereals, weigh less than things like cake, donuts, the things that give everybody diabetes, that type of stuff. So it's something that I didn't look at until like I was in this about 4 or 5 years. And it's just, you have to have those metrics of measurement for logistics and everything like that. But when you break it down and you talk about feeding people and taking care of people, that metric of measurement is like really flawed, excuse me. And it can be a deceptive measurement. I'm not shedding light on anybody, but I mean, a perfect example is you can have 2 food pantries. One gave out 600,000 pounds of food. The other one gave out 300,000 pounds last year. And people will automatically look at those numbers and pick, the pantry that gave out 600,000. But we've been at a crossroads with people where we have one pallet of food we have to take, and they got a pallet of cereal and a pallet of sparkling water. And for their metrics of measurement, they want you to take that pallet of sparkling water. But I would rather take that pallet of cereal. And it's just, it's just a flawed metric. That's all. And it's just something to look at. And those are a lot of things. When you talk about food insecurity, a lot of this stuff is time sensitive as it is. And that's a lot of red tape that you have to cut through that we really shouldn't. So that's one thing that we are really trying to focus on, is trimming down some of these, the red tape, bureaucracy, metrics of measurement that we really don't need, intake questions that we really don't need. That's why a lot of programs fall apart, is because of language barriers with intake questions and things like that. So it gets in the way of the process of what we're trying to do, which is quite simple, and that's feed people.
Thank you for sharing that.
So I had a question kind of continuing on what he was talking about with the metrics. For food insecurity, how is that being measured? Are they measuring access to fresh food? Are they just measuring access to any kind of food? Is it self-reported? How is that being determined? Because I wonder if it's being undercounted.
I think that's a good question, because I think folks are measuring it differently. Maybe the pantries are doing it differently than what USDA, and it's a balance, kind of piggyback off of what Nick said. He talked about the backpack piles program. When we started that probably 14 years ago in my county, there was a balance of, we know we want to send these healthy foods home, but one, the kids can't prepare them. Two, they're perishable. And so you end up sending things that aren't necessarily healthy, Chef Boyardee, oodles and noodles, those type of things that we know the kids could at least prepare, because we knew some of these kids were coming to school hungry, and that the only meal that they were getting, and the only balanced meal they was getting, was at school. And so, it's a real balance there. And I think some see it differently, that it should be local, fresh source. And some are saying, like Nick said, people are hungry, we should be feeding them. Why are we getting the pallet of water when we get pallet of cereals there,
And I think sometimes people, I know when I was in undergrad, we did a study in terms of food access, and we looked at how far people were from like a grocery store or even a gas station, and then what was accessible or available within that grocery store, gas station. So what types of foods. So just, I don't know if you've noticed, but in rural areas now, there's a Family Dollar, Dollar General, or a Taco Bell, or what have you, popping up on every corner. So it's almost like, okay, are we, I feel like they're saying we're solving the food insecurity problem because now we put these places and giving you access to unhealthy food, which then increases diabetes and every other unhealthy thing that, when we think about metrics. So I think that's one of the ways that people are starting to measure it, is based on what is accessible in your rural county. What do you have available where you can go get something to eat?
It seems like even if you had food available, to your point, where the kids have to be able to cook it because the parents don't have time, that it seems like some of the parents, so it's not even just in the rural places, but even in the more urban places, the parents are working 2 or 3 jobs. They don't have time or energy to be preparing any of this food. So if the kids can't do it and they don't know how to cook it, it just doesn't happen.
So I was at a conference at the end of last year, and we were talking about farmers and growing, whether it be organic, all natural foods, and selling it in certain places. And I asked the question, well, if the farmers grow this, who gonna buy it? And if we're selling it at this price point, are our local communities, are the people in our local communities going to be able to afford it? Because they're our first target market. And then not only that, you're encouraging us to grow foods for a market that doesn't really look like the people that I want to or need to be serving, which is good for my pockets to an extent because I can sell it here, but it doesn't take care of my community. So then, not only that, then who teaches them to prepare? Because that was my next thing. How do we make sure that they even, because I mean, my granny just passed, she was 104. I was very thankful to have her to show me how to cook some of these foods, but how many kids you know how to clean collard greens? So, or to even, to cook a cabbage, know how to cut it up, or if I give them an eggplant, they're gonna look at it and be like, what? I'm 34. I went to when I got to undergrad and I bought some brown eggs to school, people were like, what's wrong with your eggs? And I was like, there's some mosquitoes coming. So, this was like, they just don't know. And I feel like when we think about food insecurity and all these problems, we see all these grants and this money going out to people, right? To these organizations, even institutions, but we lack the education and the access to be able to make sure that the people can even use what we're trying to give them and make sure that people are going to be okay. So I don't know, I hope that answers your question, but all in all, we ain't doing a good job. Like the job isn't being done. There's and some people are, but there's a lot more work to have conversations within the communities to figure out, okay, or to teach them this is what we're trying to do. So like some of this money that we're getting in terms of grant funding, it should be used to build like a commissary or a group, a kitchen to teach our youth how to cook these foods, a process and show them how to do A, B, and C. And then we need to write Ninja and see if we can give every household a foodie. And so then these kids can pop it in the thing and not worry about burning down nobody's house. Like that's my goal, right?
They used to have home ec. So back when I was in middle school,
We don't have that no more.
everybody took home ec. You had to learn how to cook, how to budget.
7th and 8th grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I learned about how to make donuts in mine. That was the first thing.
Me too.
But no, they don't do that. And so because we don't have our grandmas who are teaching us that, and honestly, my other grandma, my mama is 74. I ain't seen her teach some kids how to cook now. So, we just it's not the same.
Yeah.
One organization that is in all 100 counties that could help and has done some things in my county is Corporate Extension. And so they have a kind of a piece to that. And what they would do, they were going into the housing developments in areas where the kids were, not asking them to have transportation to come to them. They were actually going there and setting up like these kitchens and things like that to show them how to prepare and do some things. And like I said, that's a resource that's already there in all 100 counties.
So what counties were doing it?
Well, we did it there as Person County, and I serve on the board here at NC State. I'm the past chair of you all's Corporate Extension Advisory Board. And so we are looking for things because we have like the second largest corporate extension in the country. And so you have a lot of employees between NC State and North Carolina A&T that's already out in counties. And corporate extension doesn't look like this. It's not the same corporate extension it was 100 years ago when it was developed. They're not going out just working with farmers. And so we see, we're looking for other things that they can contribute to the community. For instance, with the broadband and all of that, we're going to have folks in rural areas, older folks that are going to be trying to do telehealth and things like that, that aren't going to know how to use a computer or their broadband, those type of things to be able to utilize that. And then we're also trying to get them into these schools to work with these children on that.
Oh, we definitely need to talk. That was the point of one of the points of me being on this meeting tonight. Because like you said it absolutely right. We're not doing a good job. We're not doing a good job at all. And a lot of these programs, and I don't even want to name any names, a lot of these programs are like used to be effective and are now just like programs in name only. And we just took like a $240,000 ARPA grant and started a new project where we are partnering with other agencies and nonprofits, and also healthcare facilities like Wake Med, where we are going into these neighborhoods and, you know, we don't have a kitchen, but we're, you know, the Interfaith Food Shuttle used to do mobile markets. So we're going to start back doing those again. So we definitely need to connect, because the more produce we can get, I want to spend money with you all. I want to spend money with, you know, with the people who do get shut out, you know, when we do get the money, the little money we do get. And when it turns into bigger money, you know, we can just go to even more neighborhoods and, entered into Wake County Public Schools, because some of these programs are not working anymore. And that's not from my voice, that's the voice of these social workers and teachers that are in these schools, telling us how these programs are like, it's just programs in name only. And so mobile markets, partnering with other agencies, reaching across the board to other people and just learning where the service and need really is. That's one way we can just fix what's going on right now. When you talk about privilege, I go to Rocky Mount and go into the grocery stores, and I can feel my privilege being from Raleigh, North Carolina. Like, not even saying a word to anybody, you can see the difference. So there are other areas that really need more help than others if you are followed by the winds of service and need.
I also want to take some time to shout out Sue and the work that she does on campus. I know a lot of dietitians on campus, as well as SNAP Ed offers consultations to help students to expand their food options and learn how to cook with what they have, as well as how to get a more balanced diet on what they can get access to.
What's the name of that program that you're talking about? Like what she does?
Sue, would you like to speak to that?
Thanks for the shout out, Taylor, but I will echo kind of everyone who just spoke about like feeling that kind of like that obstacle that just feels so insurmountable sometimes in terms of trying to help the people that we're trying to serve. But yeah, I get to work with, you know, students and undergrads, and I came from like federally qualified health centers in my work in New Hampshire and Vermont. So they were, you know, everyone was living, you know, with maybe a grocery store 30 minutes away. There were no sidewalks. There was, you know, no one had a job. There were no jobs left in the towns. And so much of my work there, you know, working with Cooking Matters and going into the neighborhoods and trying to teach where people were located really colors and transitions to how I do my work now, and always asking students like, where are you at right now? And really trying to bridge that gap between what they have for themselves as expectations for, you know, social media reasons or whatever reasons and expectations they think is quote unquote the right way to eat or the perfect way to eat, and really thinking like, okay, well, what do you have today? Like what skills, what tools, what implements, like what do you have today? And maybe it's just like, you know, I have to talk about the pantry more often, or I have to give them more resources, or just be like, hey, can you get a good night's sleep tonight? It really challenges like what I envisioned when I first went into nutrition about like the kind of work I'd be doing, because so much unfortunately is becoming cyclical in that, you know, there's no living wage, there's no right to food. There's so many ways that we keep people in poverty. And like, I'm not a miracle worker. Like I would love everyone to have fresh produce. And the biggest obstacle is that people aren't getting paid the right way or enough, or they're not, you know, all the barriers in terms of geographics and job access and all those things, they continue to compound on food, because food is an easy place to cut when you feel like bills are coming.
You have to work an hour at minimum wage to buy a dozen of eggs right now with inflation prices. And I saw like on a Facebook thing today, several farmers are still selling, you know, farm fresh eggs for $5 a dozen, when now, you know, they couldn't sell their eggs because you could buy a dozen eggs for $1 in the grocery store. Now that's flipped. So how do we let folks know that they can access those farm fresh eggs and now cheaper?
Yeah.
I don't know, because some of us are selling them for $7. I mean, you think about the cost of feed and what it, you know, even if depending on where we're going for a market, Gyra Family Farms, their eggs out there in Durham, they have a system where you can just drive up and get the eggs. They were $5. They went up $2 now. So they're $7. I mean, they're fresh eggs, they're good eggs. So, but I'm just saying, like, even for the farmer, it's getting even harder for us. These prices for us are probably going to be comparable to what you're going to get in the grocery store very soon because of how much everything costs. Like I don't know if there's going to be a middle ground. The biggest thing for farmers is that we can eat ourselves. Like I don't have to go buy everything from the store. I can actually, if I got a hog, if I got, some vegetables, I can make it, at least I can feed myself. And is that the way that we're going to the point, especially for the small farmer? Am I just going to be able to feed myself at this point? So everything is consistently going up.
It's gonna cost me $600 an acre to plant corn this year. And 3 years ago, that was $200. So yes, the input prices have gone up. But what we're finding for those big commodity growers that's selling what you buy in the grocery store, they're getting cents on the dollar. For what they're making, for what, it all goes to the distributor. And then the retailer. The farmer makes very little on what you purchase out of the grocery store.
Right. And then even at that, depending on where you're at, if you have been conditioned to go to the store down the street, then that's where you're going. Even if you have SNAP benefits, that's where you're going to go. And even so Bladen County is the county that I'm from, and that's where my farmers are, and that, where our land is, all of the above. But even there, changing we have to go. So like Elizabethtown, Whiteville, Lumberton, those are the places that they're going to go because then you have your Walmart, your Food Lines, what have you. The farmers, we're like right off Highway 87. So you have to pass by us to get to these other places. But 9 times out of 10, they're not going to stop. And that is the part, is to change people's minds. So the goal this year is maybe get into some of these churches. Like, how do we tell the people at the church, hey, look, this is how you can eat. This is how you can eat a little cheaper. If you come here, you can get A, B, and C, or here's our box. And then just finding ways to bring farmers together. That's another thing that I feel like we're struggling with too, is so many farmers are trying to do this by themselves. You got farmers they're probably within minutes of each other to an extent, but they are all trying to be, because you don't know how else to do it, but there's no community there. And I don't know if anybody else has experienced this as well, but just the lack of community around coming together to put everything together. So that's when I'm a network weaver, and I'm bringing together people to try to figure out how to bring some of these farmers together in Bladen County, Robertson County, Columbus County, to say, okay, here we are, here's what we can do. Now, how do we distribute this food at this point? Because cooperative extension ain't always there. It's great what y'all are doing in Person County, but out of several other counties, these extension agents are older. They don't know any new routines. They don't know anything else, and they're not doing their job. So again, access to people, access to resources for advertisement, there's just so much that is not there. And I don't want to sound so negative, but that is a hurdle, especially again for these older farmers that are growing things and try to make it. Now we got high tunnels and this, that, and the third now. But again, in order for them to recoup this money, they are about to start growing food that is not necessarily what the Black community has necessarily eaten, right? And so we're going to be catering to other markets, and then we're right back to where we started because they don't know what to do with this food, and they don't know how to eat it. So we got to find somebody else to buy it. So I'm sorry, that was a lot, but it's just there's so many different things. But go ahead.
Can I ask a question kind of off of that? So I was at a farming conference a little while ago, and Leah Penniman did a keynote speech, and she was saying that even when those programs come into the more rural or low income areas, they'll teach the kids how to make a kale salad or something like that. And she was pretty much we don't want your kale salad, and so it's have you run into those issues where it's even when those programs come in and they teach the kids how to make this, if the kid's not used to eating a kale salad, like they're gonna go back to eating their Cheetos or, you know, kind of like whatever they have access to, like, it kind of goes back to like changing, like, kind of like
Right.
what the people are eating, or like using what people are used to eating and like trying to make it, like teach them how to make it healthier or use the local ingredients or.
So it definitely depends on how old the child is, and it definitely depends on what they've been taught. If their parent has not taught them to be open to something new,
Mhm.
then no, they don't want it.
Yeah.
But then you have to figure out how to, okay, here's what we have, try it, doctor it up, add a little bit of dressing or something to make them say it's good for you and good to you. Like the other week, I took my little cousin to, I was only eating vegetables, right? So I took him and we had a cauliflower pizza, and he was like, "What is this?" And no, I don't want it. I said, "Well, you got money to buy another pizza?" And he said, "No." I said, "Well, you gonna eat this pizza?" And so when the pizza came out, he was like, Brielle. I was like, Trey. And so he got the pizza and he ate. He said, "Oh, this was really good." I said, "I know. Now eat another piece." So it was just like, you know, sometimes you can't give kids a choice. You got no choice. You got no money, you got no job. So those are certain things I think too. You have to also, you know, you're gonna have probably have some pushback with the kid, and depending on how old they are, it's gonna be harder. And it depends on what the parent is going to teach at home. They have to be willing and open to reinforce it. But I do think programs like that, when they do come, they are helpful, just like the litter bug. I remember when I was in school, I didn't want to litter. I told my mama she didn't need to litter because that bug said don't do it. So I think there are certain things that when we start to teach this and we make it repetitive, children's mindsets will change. But a lot of the times, depending on the county you're in, we do not have 4-H programs. We don't have programs that cater to students of color. We are not in those programs. I was not in 4-H. I was not in FFA because those people didn't look like me. And so I didn't go and venture into that, even though I was involved in agriculture all my life. There was nothing that excited me about that. And the people were not catering to anybody who looked like me. So we did not join that program. So that's why I try to make it a point to go to things like that or to be a part of these organizations so that I can see what's going on and be a face to help children or adults think differently and say, okay, well, if she up there and she might be the only one, I'll go ahead and, you know, maybe I can hear or listen or try it because she's there.
I think that's the balance because, you know, a farmer to farmer's got to try to make money. And that's where the urban counties have done a little bit better job, right? I mean, Durham County, they have the money. So the Durham schools have already committed to doing like culturally based foods during the week. So you'll have whatever this week, that week. So those kids are getting introduced to those type of things. You're right. I grow things I don't eat because I didn't grow up eating it. But there's a market for it because I'm just 30-40 minutes from Durham and Chapel Hill. But you know, and I'm past president of my FFA chapter in Preston County. But yeah. But there's that's the balance, right? Because I've got to grow. If I'm going to grow anything, I got to make money. And if I'm in a rural area, I can't just keep growing the same things.
Agreed.
Because everybody up the street is going to have a garden. And they're all going to grow their own tomatoes. They're going to grow their own yellow squash, zucchini, these things that are very common. So the farmer has to kind of start then venturing out to find some niche type things just to make money to keep growing those squash and things that everybody's going to have. So now he has to sell it for $2 a pound or, you know, something like that, just because it's not really a market there. So that's the balance. You have the farmer there that could hopefully locally source, but he's got to be able to make money. And then you got these insecure areas or these food deserts to where they may not want what he's growing or can afford what he's growing.
Or they don't know they want it. They don't know they want it. Like your nephew, he didn't know that he would like cauliflower pizza.
But I have grant money to help you with your farmers and churches.
I support that. Let's do it.
Yeah, so this is just, I'm from Southern Johnston County. And it just kind of, this is like personal observations, like piggybacking off with what we've been talking about. So in my small town, I'm from Fort Oaks, North Carolina, and there's a very small food pantry that was started. I don't know exactly what year, but about middle 2021, I was starting to help out and I became a volunteer there. And the food pantry grew over the time I was there to the size to where we could not support all the people that we were like having lined up out the door every Tuesday and Thursday from 2 to 4. Like the line would keep going. We would have to end up staying open an extra hour, and we ended up really having to ration like who got what amount of food because there were just so many people. But even then, so one of the owners of the food pantry, she had a backyard garden, and she would bring some zucchinis and tomatoes that she had brought so that people could have access to fresh food. And what I found kind of interesting is because something like, I believe, also people should have access to that fresh food, because obviously what's in the food pantry is just vanilla wafers and the sparkling water. There was a lot of that, and just other things that are not of the highest nutrition value. But those people, we would ask like, hey, do you want produce? So we'd always make an effort to like ask like, this is here, do you want fresh food? And most of them would be like, no, like I don't want it. And I found that really interesting. And I wonder if it has like some correlation, not just financially to why they may have been utilizing the food pantry, but to why they may not want it. A lot, like the overwhelming majority of those people were like older generation folks, and they had very intense medical conditions. Like there was a deaf lady that would come all the time because she couldn't afford food because she'd have to keep like some with their hearing aids, like couldn't afford it. And like there were a lot of people that had like, the older generation, they had like wrist issues, and they're like, I don't want to cook. Like I just want something I can take out of the box and eat. So I don't know, those just are some interesting things that from my personal like observation, like it all kind of connects. And plus like the little, this more rural area where I'm from, there's tons of farms, but once again, they have to turn around and make profit. So obviously they're not going to be just giving away food when they need to feed themselves. But there were about 2 or 3 farmer stands across like Benson and Four Oaks that I knew about. And a lot of people, you would find not a lot of people would go to those things because the food was expensive, even still there, just as it was at the grocery store. Like I remember going one time just to support local farmers, of course, getting fresh strawberries because they taste better too. And one little basket of strawberries was $12. And this was 2 years ago. So
Girl, I make jam, and
Yeah.
I sell my jam for $10 to $12 for an 8-ounce jar.
Yep.
It's not cheap for me to go buy this produce, or even I support farmers and I have to buy, I pay them for what it is, and I pay them probably more. So I don't have a choice but to sell it for more. And it's really hard. And it's really sad. Like, oh girl, if I had enough money to just save the world, I'd do it. And I'm not gonna talk no more after this. But one of the things I really feel like, so I'm a part of the Black Farmers Market, and one of the things that we are doing is looking for ways. One of the goals is at some point being able to like provide meals that come from farm fresh foods that we can package and that will be ready for people to eat at some point. That's down the line, but that is one of the goals, because we recognize that too, especially with the older generation. And being at the farmers market, the Black Farmers Market, and being a vendor, it is one of the things that we have done a phenomenal job about is finding, we've been making sure to increase the number of people who have SNAP benefits or use WIC and different things like that to get them to the market. So we definitely have seen an increase over this past year. So as those people have come in, they're still like, man, this is expensive. So they only have a certain amount of tickets to get certain things. And of course, with some of our farmers, because of who they are, they're gonna give it away, right? But like, we're still, it's like, you look at the people, we can only get so much. Like my watermelons, and they have seeds, you're gonna pay $10 to $12 for my watermelon. Like that's just what it is. And it's a good, healthy, non-GMO watermelon. So you're gonna pay for this watermelon. But even with those benefits, they definitely not going as far as what they used to. So we're seeing that. And we've seen people, just the numbers, how it fluctuated. People came because they were supporting Black and brown farmers, right? But then it was like, dang, this is expensive. This costs just as much as if I were to go to the store. So those are some of the challenges that we've also faced being at this market. And because we are not like your NC State farmers market, where a lot of those farmers, we're doing this stuff by hand. Some of these the farmers there, like the jams and jellies, they produce, their jams and jelly come from Bladen County, from Elizabethtown, where they're processing it, right? But I actually make my stuff by hand. So it's a huge difference. So you can sell your stuff for $5 a jar because you didn't really make it. But I put in the time, effort, and all of the above. So that is one of the differences with Black farmers and white farmers as well, or just farmers of color, period. These are some of the same stuff is not there. I don't have the money to be in no processing plant either. Like, and I also don't want you making my stuff because I want you stealing my recipe. So there are certain things like we just not gonna do. But those are all the that's a real thing, girl. Real thing.
One thing to do is try to support these programs that we've seen in the past that help, like double bucks and things like that.
Yeah.
that These farmers markets can take advantage of, where if I spend 5, I get 5. You know, but we're seeing even those are being defunded.
Yeah.
And so a lot of counties and people, markets who had those programs are losing them.
Yeah.
We have a few final questions in the, oh, I'm sorry, you can go ahead, Nick, if you had to add to that.
I'm sorry. I've been so with this project we just started, our next phase is partnering with different produce partners. And I haven't been trying my hardest, but I've been trying to partner with the Black farmers market because I'm height of the pandemic, the summer of the 2020, I was spending $6,000 a week with Cisco Foods. I'm not spending that much now, but I'm spending way much more than before the pandemic. And I am trying to divert those. I got a little bit of power right now, and I can divert those funds to where I need to divert them. So can we please make a connection? Because that like I said, that was one of the points of me being on this meeting tonight, was figuring out how we can help feed the pack as well as partner with other agencies, because that's what we're doing right now. And we need to talk before next week because we got some meetings with the city council on Wednesday. So can we talk, please? Because like we're acting like now, like we jumped into Wake County Public Schools. We got a phone call on Tuesday. We jumped into Wake County Public Schools on Thursday. We are operating as if this is an emergency, because it is. So we are ready to act now. I got some money to spend, and we want to spend it with, you know, the people who need it most, as well as serve the people who need it most.
If you send me an email too, I can look in our network. If you say like a 60-mile, 40-mile radius, so I can find farmers that's in our network that have access, that's availability to deliver. We can get you names of some farmers you can reach out to.
Okay, and we can do pickup as well. We this is what we're doing. It's a grassroots effort, man. Like we're starting where the help is needed most, and we're not waiting on help. We're not waiting on the city's help. So we can do what we can do now. You know what I mean? So we can get the ball rolling.
This is the perfect time to contact farmers because they're planning their season.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. Is there something, I guess when we talk, and just questions that I definitely have in my mind right now, what is it that you need grown? Does it matter? Because if we can just, if it's what grows well there, would you take that too? Like, and again, it's a lot of diverse produce, but I've got 2 farmers now who have just started. So they just started growing in high tunnels. So they are exploring like different types of vegetables, but definitely you'll have your cabbage or squash or, you know, your everyday.
I'll tell you this, I don't mean to cut you off, but I will tell you this. We have I have a real high Hispanic client base, and they do like produce. They do like all of that stuff. They come here with trash bags. So we'll talk. I'm not into saying no to just about anything right now, because number one, this project is also about highlighting the partners that we are involved with and what we're trying to do. And when you talk about Black and brown farmers not getting the credibility, outreach, awareness, whatever you want to call it, that's what this is for too as well, to shine the light on those disparities. So we are trying to open up we're going to open up a new pipeline. So all we need to do is start talking and putting pen to paper.
I support it.
We have 2 final questions from the chat. Do you all think micro farming, like in kitchens or suburban backyards, would grow popular to combat food insecurity? And also, is there a way that African Americans can culturally or make culturally their cuisine healthier?
I think you do see quite a few people kind of doing the micro farming and stuff now. It doesn't really solve our issue of the insecurity for the community. But I think you see a lot more people paying attention to food costs, what they're consuming. Rather it's GMO or whatnot, and so starting to try to grow their own things at home. And, you know, as far as making our cuisine healthier, I don't know if it's what we're cooking or rather than how we're cooking it. And so, you know, we also kind of got to change America's mindset, right? You know, one time lard was bad, now we have all these processed oils. Now we're hearing maybe lard is not as bad as they said it was years ago, and pork isn't the other white meat. It should be. I can show you some of my pork and it looks like ribeye steaks. It's red meat. They're raised on pasture and you know, these type of things. And so I think it's just kind of changing our mindset, not necessarily in the African-American community, but in America as a whole.
I think it's really about how we prepared it. Again, I told you my granny, she was 104, and she had a lot of stuff. And a lot of it was what she grew in her backyard. The pork she ate, the vegetables she grew, the beef she ate, all of the above. And she, you know, her and my granddaddy, they ate good. You know, they ate in good portion sizes, what have you. But, you know, there was all this stuff. It's changed so much. And I mean, when you look at, if you've ever grown your own food and you see the difference in what it looks like when you go out and you kill a chickens ain't supposed to be this big. Like, it's not that supposed to be that way. So, I mean, it's what we're feeding our animals, it's what we're putting on our produce, it's all of the above. And just again, about making the right choices about what we're gonna eat. People, like you said, we have the choice to microwave our food or we can cook it. So that's a big thing too. It's like, you know, we've made everything more accessible in a microwave society. And we are not like other countries. Like, I think America is the only country where you have to prove that something will kill you. In other places, they're like, if it's not healthy, we don't want it. If it's not going to help us or build me up, then we don't need this. Here, we got to prove that, okay, it ain't gonna kill you. As long as it doesn't kill you, we can survive. But that's not how.
That makes a lot of sense, even in context to our smaller pantry. We serve a lot of international students. And even so, we provide fresh produce that's favorable to the can of beans or, you know, the processed food that might be available year round, whereas produce depends on the season, just because it's natural and you know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Any final thoughts? I'm just gonna put up some information for the folks here. Let's skip through some of this stuff. Okay, some on-campus resources, and where I found some of the stats that I mentioned, as well as information from our awesome presenters. But thank you for taking the time to be here, to our presenters, as well as to our guests this evening. And yes, the recording will be available later. Can I get next?
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Wonderful talk. We could do this all night, I feel like. Thank you for having me.